Hey guys, my name is Megan, and today I'm going to be talking about the first episode of the Serial podcast. If we all take a quick second to think about a time in our lives where lines have gotten blurry, I'm confident we could all succeed. Morals, having a friendship with your boss, deciding whether letting your little sibling climb the tree in the backyard is letting them have their fun or sentencing them to death. I could go on forever, but I won't. Instead, I'll highlight one of the most profound blurry lines that occurs in society today: fact versus opinion. Having a blurry line between fact and opinion can be a small issue, like in an argument with your sister, or it can be a major issue, like in a murder case. The latter is the type of impact a blurry line between fact and opinion has on what we're discussing today. And so today I will share with you the claims made by several parties in the first episode of the Serial podcast and determine which ones are based in fact and which ones are based in opinion. The first claim I would like to take a look at is the witness testimony that became the crux of the entire case. This main testimony is given by Adnan Syed's friend, Jay Winters. I know that you all have listened to the podcast, and so you know the story in detail, so I'll just give you a summary for the purpose of the presentation. So basically, him and Adnan went shopping. Adnan tells him he wants to kill Hay, and then when Jay drops him off at school, he says, "Keep my car and my phone. I'll call you once I've done it, and you'll have to come get me." Adnan calls him later that day. Jay goes and picks him up at the Best Buy, sees the body. They take Hay's car and ditch it in a park and ride. And then Jay takes Adnan back to school for track practice so he has a quote-unquote alibi. And then he picks him up from track practice and they go bury the body. So as of right now, we do not have any physical evidence to back up this story. I know that later on down the road in the series, the host and her team do look at the physical evidence of this story, but right now we don't have that. And so we're just looking at his version of the story. There's no facts. So this leads us to decide whether it's a fact or opinion, but it's not really an opinion, and we know it's not a fact because we can't verify it yet. So it kind of falls into this weird gray area that basically Jay is presenting it as a fact, saying this is what happened this day. But it's just not verifiable because we can't back it up with any evidence. But it's not like he's giving his opinion on it. So it's just in this weird middle spot. So I feel like the best thing to call it is really just an unverifiable fact. And that will require will require physical evidence in order to verify it. And so now that we've taken a look at Jay's story, let's take a look at Adnan's. The second major claim made in this episode of Serial is Adnan's version of what happened the day that Hay was murdered. So again, I know you know this part, but just going to summarize it. So Adnan's version goes like this. Adnan drove to Jay's house during his free period to make sure that Jay was going to buy a birthday present for Jay's girlfriend and Adnan's good friend, Stephanie. And so he says, "Just take me back to school, but then you can have my car and just pick me up when track is over." And he says that when school got out, he went to the library, most likely. He doesn't really specifically remember, but that's most likely what he did. He'd go and check his email. And then he went to track practice, and Jay picked him up, and then they hung out, but he doesn't remember the details because the day wasn't significant to him. And so with Adnan's story, we are again dealing with the same issue as Jay's. There's no evidence yet. And so therefore, it falls into the exact same gray area of it's not an opinion, it's being presented as fact, but it's not verifiable. So it is, again, an unverifiable fact. So now that we've discussed the two sides of this part of the story, let's talk about a third story that is an attempt to provide evidence. One of the first trails of evidence that the makers of Serial go down after hearing Adnan and Jay's sides of the story is Adnan's possible alibi offered up by a girl named Asia McClain. So after Adnan got arrested, Asia sent him a couple of letters while he was in prison to tell him the story that she remembers seeing him in the library at that day when he came in right after school got out at 2:15, and she talked to him until she got picked up around like 3:15. So, and the thing is, we know that Hay's time of death was at 2:36. And so if he got to the library at 2:15 and didn't leave until 3:15, there's no way he could have murdered Hay. So that was Asia's point. So she writes him these letters hoping to give him an alibi, hoping to help him out because he's a friend. So the thing is, we're kind of left with the same issue of finding out whether Asia's story is true. These simple facts of timetables would, in fact, prove Adnan's innocence, but that's only if Asia's actually telling the truth. And so, again, we're left to look for some physical evidence that would verify Asia's story of Adnan being at the library. And so they look for a few things. They look at whether there's security tapes, but the videos have been destroyed. They look to see if they can look at his activity, logging into his email account, but his account doesn't exist anymore, so it leads them to a dead end. And so, again, it falls into that same gray area of a story being presented as fact, but it's unverifiable so far. And so now that we've discussed the third major story presented in the episode, let's take a look at the claims made about Adnan's motive. Two major claims are made about his motive, one by the prosecutor and one by Adnan himself. The prosecutor says that Adnan essentially put everything on the line in order to date Hay, and that their breakup sent him into a fit of rage. And they back this up by the reality of Adnan's background, which is that he's from an immigrant Muslim family who doesn't allow him to do most of the things that normal American teenagers do. Party, smoke weed, date, go to dances, none of that. And so they're saying that basically he sacrificed everything to be with her, and so the breakup just caused him to go into a fit of rage and he murdered her out of that. However, Adnan retaliates with that and says that it's an exaggeration. He says, he loved her, but kind of in the way of high school love, and when they broke up, he got over her and moved on. And he uses the evidence of the fact that there was no documentation of him ever acting out against her before that. So it would be like an insanely quick escalation from he's fine to he murders her. So both of these claims do bring facts to the table, but they rely on opinion to bring the idea home. Adnan wasn't allowed to date. Fact. He put everything on the line in order to date her. That's more of a matter of opinion. With Adnan's side of the story, him never acting out in anger or hatred towards her, that's a fact. But that means that he couldn't have escalated to murder, that's more of an opinion. So now that we've looked at the claims made by Adnan's motive, or made about Adnan's motive, let's discuss the claims made about his ability to commit murder. Several times throughout the episode, the idea of Adnan just not being able to commit murder comes up. Rabia, the woman who initially contacted the makers of Serial, who is the older sister of Adnan's best friend, Saad, her and Saad both admit to Sarah, the host, Sarah Koenig, that Adnan just didn't seem like that kind of guy. He was a good guy. He was a star athlete. He was popular. He was homecoming prince. Everybody loved him, and he was a nice guy to people. It just didn't seem like somebody that would commit murder. And in this episode specifically, Sarah, the host, mentions vaguely that she hears that from a lot of people over the course of the year that she does this. And I know that later on in episodes, they do touch on that. But at this point, it's just kind of a vague generalization. She heard that from a lot of people. And then Sarah herself says that because she meets him in person in the prison and she talks to him on the phone every week. And she says the same thing. She just does not feel like he's the kind of guy that would commit murder. And but the thing is that even though there are so many sources that repeat the same thing, like, Adnan's such a good guy, he never commit murder, blah, 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 we can't depend on it because it's very clearly opinion. It's just how people feel about this guy. It's not a verifiable fact by any stretch of the imagination. And so, in short, the episode includes very few facts. Granted, it's the first episode, and some of these claims are backed up with evidence later on in the series. But however, as of right now, we have to take a critical eye to the information that has been given so far. And so there are a lot of opinions and unverifiable facts, if you will, given in this episode that may sway our opinion of what we think happened. However, as we take a strictly factual look at this case thus far as it has been presented to us in this episode, and start to form a conclusion about Adnan's innocence or guilt, almost everything presented in this episode must be regarded as unfactual. Thank you.